I will continue in English because our next speaker is it's not from Holland. Here she is. She is originally from USA, Norway, but all over the world. She's really a world citizen. She is a design anthropologist, which is interesting because I've never met a design anthropologist. That's the first time. And a psychologist. And she works now mostly in the public sector, which is interesting for here today. And she's trying to changing the minds in those sectors to become more sustainable. Like I said, she has traveled all over the world, so she must have solutions for our minor problem in our little Holland, our rich little Holland. I'm very happy to see her here because she's really famous and she has a good story. Listen to Kirah.
Hello. Good morning. I'm afraid I'm not coming with any solutions because I believe the solutions are sitting in this room. So I will try and talk from that perspective. I got a new gadget, so let's see if I can make it work. Yes. So the first story I want to tell is my trip here to Eindhoven. I live in Oslo, Norway, so I had to take a train to Amsterdam, and from there a train. That part went really well because there was very good signage and information so that I could ask at information booths or see on a plakat poster where I needed to go to get the train to Eindhoven. It was very smooth. In fact, I was very happy about that part. And then I arrived at Eindhoven, and you know, it's my first time here, and I was thinking, oh, design capital of the world. So I'm quite excited about coming here. And I got off the train, and it was impossible to find anything. I went to every office in that train station. It started with just one office, thinking it was an information place, but it was for the bus service, and there was a very big sign and a grumpy man looking at it. The big sign said, only bus information, everything else go to the train one, on the other side of the train station. And so that grumpy man scared me from even asking because I wanted to walk to my hotel. And there was so little information, so it was quite impossible. And then I thought to myself, my goodness, this is the design capital of the world, and what have they done? So the end result was I decided to take a taxi. So I went to the taxi cab driver. Taxi cab drivers are always the best source of information anywhere you want to go, in any country. My best stories are from taxi cab drivers. So I just said to him, well, can you drive me to this place? And he looked at me and said, are you crazy? You can walk there in 5 minutes. And I said, okay, great. How do I walk there? And he gave me the information, and I thanked him very much. So that was my first issue, and then I came to this great kind of design hotel. Do you know this hotel? You guys know it? It's called Art Hotel. It's right here, right centered. And I walk in, and I'm met with these brilliant, you know, glass, beautiful flower things. And the first thing I noted was that the glass petals poked me, and I couldn't get close. But rather than have my own judgments, I said, oh, so how do you like these things? I see, you know, they're quite beautiful, but how do you like them? Oh, we hate them. They're totally useless. We don't have enough room behind. And you only have this one petal here for the customer to put anything. And I'm one of those people who has to take out my whole handbag before I can find the right thing. So it was a really interesting experience. And then this morning I took a shower, and I'm having a nice shower. But the reason, last night I froze to death. I was so cold, and there's no possibility to change the temperature in the room. So I called reception to say, can you help me? And they said, well, we have central heating, so we will bring you a heater. So they had to bring me this little heater to warm up my room. And I live in Norway, so I'm used to cold. This is not a problem normally. It's never been a problem before. And then the third issue was I'm taking this nice shower, very beautifully designed. The mirrors were too high, so I couldn't see my face in the mirror, hence why I look like this today. But then I'm taking the shower, and I didn't notice this until I got out, and I was extremely lucky because something must have been wrong with the shower, and there's only it's designed to be so beautiful. There's only a little lip there, so all the water was pouring out onto the floor. And the floor did not have a safety drain. So the water was quite high up. And the interesting thing is, if you see at the bottom picture, there is a carpet and a bathroom, and the tiles, and there was only a little lip and the water was completely up. I was extremely lucky that it didn't go over. Why is this interesting? Well, my point is design has to be for usage. It has to be meaningful, relevant, useful, and desirable for the people we serve. And when we create for ourselves, then we often end up with this kind of lack of functionality. And it's always easiest for me to explain this when I show pictures like this from today's experience in your city. The other thing, I did walk here. I find it extremely confusing. I understand you guys understand what lane is a bike lane and what lane is a train, or I mean a walking, a pedestrian. But one of the problems I faced each time was, do the bicycles stop? If it's a green light going across here, do I still have to watch for the bikes going this way? And it seemed to me I had to. So by stopping and observing, but I almost got hit twice because I wasn't thinking about it. So your design of a functional city to me seems like it's missing a few things. And I hope that you guys think and reflect on this, because we have to design for a sustainable future. And the money that we invest in designing for the sustainable future has to do with making it meaningful, relevant, useful, and desirable for us all. Now, I'll go a little further than this picture. The most important thing that I bring to the table for all of my customers, for the people I work with, started in daycare center. And as you can see, I am not the smallest person in the room there. I was a little bit higher. I grew up in Asia, in 3 different Asian countries, and each time my parents put me into the local school system. And many of you think that's very romantic or exotic, but it also had its challenges. For me, I had, of course, to learn a new language and a new culture. And what I didn't realize until much later in my life, the day I took my first anthropology course, was that what I had as a survival skill was the most important thing I bring to the table. And that was to make friends with these children. I had to understand them from their perspective and not my own. And that is the whole key to success in designing for the people, with the people, is understanding each other, whether it's the people in your own organization or whether it's the people outside of your organization, that we're always taking the time to stop pushing our own thoughts forward, but listening, and I call it active listening. It's actually very difficult, and understanding people from their perspective and moving from that point forward. So I'd like to ask you to understand your customers and potential customers from their perspective and not your own. Now, yesterday I did a talk for the one of the ministries in Norway, and customers, it was a word that they thought was kind of strange to use, but I still like it. In this case, really the only word I like is people, but when I say people, nobody seems to understand what I'm talking about. I don't get that, but okay. They like users, but how many of you woke up this morning and thought, I'm a user? Did anyone? No. So I don't like that word. The idea around customer is because in the English language, when we talk about the people we serve, it's customers. It means that we're there for them, that we're not there for ourselves. And customers can be your office mate. It can be one of your colleagues that you have to work together with. Or it can be the people who live in Eindhoven or whatever community you are coming from. So that's what I mean here. Another learning, which is perhaps the most important for all of you in this room, I think, and certainly was for me, is best described through my child. This is Åsa Maria when she was 2 years old. You know she's Scandinavian because she's wearing a striped sweater. All Scandinavian children have this striped sweater. Maybe it's come to Holland now, but it's very much so. You can tell she's a nice Norwegian girl. She liked two things when she was little. She liked her mother's chicken soup, which comes from a family recipe. It takes 12 hours to make. And you wait and see that it gets a little bit jelly-like. Then you know you've made a good soup. The other thing she liked was a cookie, tasteless cookie. I'm sure you have one of these for children. It's just a cookie, a biscuit. And I came in one morning, she's 2 at this time, and I start yelling at her, "What are you doing?" And she looked at me like, "You stupid woman." And she put her hand like this and she said, "I'm making cookie soup." That's important for 2 reasons. The first is that's actually a definition of innovation, what she was doing. It's taking 2 unrelated things. You guys, no one in this room would have thought soup and, chicken soup and cookies, right? It's taking 2 unrelated things, seemingly unrelated things, putting them together to come up with something that's meaningful and relevant, useful and desirable up here. So it's taking these 2 things and creating something else of value. And that's what she was doing for herself. And what do? We spend our entire lives killing creativity. We are born creative. We are born curious. But we spend our entire lives getting that taken away from us. All of you in this room have cookie soup inside you. That's the way we are. So go find it. And that's what I ask, is to bring back this idea that curiosity, curiosity and creativity, it's what brings us joy in our everyday lives. So go back and find it. And do it in your offices, because it is possible within the framework of your job. So the path to the people-centric approach came from these moments in my own life. But when I started working at Boeing, I was supposed to write a 40,000 passenger, pilot, and flight attendant survey. It was quantitative in nature, so I came to Boeing as a psychologist. And they gave me the areas of topics to write, or to write these questions on. The purpose was to have information from passengers, pilots, and flight attendants so that they could put that information into building the next new airplane. What happened during the time that I worked there was that I looked at the questions they wanted me to formulate and was frustrated. I traveled my entire life and I felt like there was nothing that I would add there. There was no understanding of the passenger perspective or the pilot perspective or the flight attendant perspective, but there was a great understanding of the Boeing perspective. So I suggested, look, you're going to have me on these airplanes. They were long hauls, at least 6-hour long flights or more. Let me, if I'm going to be there handing out these surveys, why don't you also let me talk to these people, observe In anthropology, we call it participatory observation. In my days, there was nothing called design anthropology. There was no understanding of the applied nature of anthropology. So this was new and a lot of failing forward for me. And it just came up as a natural thing to do. It wasn't, I wasn't thinking, oh, I want to be a design anthropologist. And Boeing let me do this. And what I found out was that quantitative data, and I suspect that many of you in your jobs use a lot of quantitative data, it tells us what an issue is, but it doesn't talk to us about why or how. And the whys and how are where we can make a big difference in people's lives. The result was the Dreamliner. Thank God I'm not an engineer, because I am not the cause of all the problems this plane is having. But you'll be happy to know that the very early work that I did on this research is the reason we have 24/7 entertainment systems on planes. They were thinking of building a plane without windows, and we increased the sizes of the windows. In fact, we made it so you don't have to shut the shutter, because the windows change and can become dark even if it's light outside, but you can still see through the glass of this window. Lots of details, don't have time, I only have 30 minutes to talk to you guys. From that experience, I was working very happy at Boeing. I loved my job. I was flying around the world almost every day. And Microsoft called and asked if I wanted a job with them. I can't tell you the funny story about it because it was funny, but I said yes. And the first thing they wanted me to do was understand how people use computers, how they set them up in the internet. At the time, they were very focused on quantitative work, so they asked me to study 40 families to make it statistically relevant. In each family, they told me that I should spend 3 hours with them, because on average in the laboratories, it takes 3 hours to set up one of these computers to the internet. Well, I doubled that time, thinking that would be enough. However, I found out it wasn't enough. In fact, of all my 40 families, none of them were able to set up the computer and the internet in 3 hours, 6 hours, 12 hours, or 18 hours. After 2 days in each family, I realized that I had a problem, or Microsoft had a problem. The point was that during this process, I had a presentation to people maybe double the size of this room, and the first question I got was, where did you find these stupid people? The man you just saw had worked 16 hours on this, trying to get his computer to work. The second question I got was, why should we listen to you? You know nothing about technology. And that made me very angry, so I changed my rules. I wouldn't go out alone. And this goes back to this idea of expertise. I am not an expert. I can facilitate something, but I don't know anything about technology. But I can tell you that the aspirations and motivations of everyday people are very important to understanding what it is we need to do to fix the problems we have in our everyday lives. And this video got around Microsoft. What I refused to do was go out alone. So I took with me leaders at Microsoft. I took with me the developers and the designers and the project managers, the business developers, and insisted I refused to go out again to a family if I didn't have them to come with me. And that was a key turning point in these projects, because those people become the ambassadors of the voice of the everyday people into the product development cycle of products and services. But I think we'll leave it at that. What these films resulted in was a program called Real People, Real Data. And the way I got the money is one of the senior vice presidents of Windows saw this film. In fact, the senior vice president saw the film I just showed you, and he came to me with his hands like this and said, "Stop humiliating me. How much money do you need?" You don't need that much money. You just need empathy, to be honest. The Real Data program is about involving everyday people in your product development or service development or policy developments, from insight, understanding the aspirations and motivations of everyday people, to creating the ideas together, to the design and development of those ideas, to testing out the ideas, to implementing them, and yes, even public sector has marketing and sales. I recently worked with the health department who had a big campaign about physical activity. In fact, the definition for them, what they were trying to promote was that everybody should have 30 minutes of physical activity a day and you won't have a problem. Norwegians are known to be extremely sporty out in the nature, and we like to suffer a little bit and go out and do kind of Iron Man type things. And we're known for this. But not everyone can do it, and when you start having children and having a life and a job, you can't go out and commune with nature as much. So anyway, they had this campaign, but they were noticing they weren't getting any improvement when they were doing their surveys about physical activity. So they came in with me and we did a workshop, and the first thing I did was send them all out onto the street. Their target groups were youth and women in the ages of 40, 50, and 60. And those are the two target the ones having the most difficulties around physical activity, and to find out what they think. And so they asked a lot of people about physical activity. And they met a woman who's walking with her pram, with her baby, on the street of Oslo, and they ask her, "So, how much physical activity do you do daily?" And the woman says, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I don't have time for that, I don't do it anymore." And they're looking puzzled because physical activity just means moving your body for 30 minutes. And for them, that was the most natural thing. But the language they were using did not register in the heads of those everyday people, because physical activity for this woman and many others during their little quick interview, it was only a half hour out on the streets. They filmed it all. But the experience, the word physical activity was either going to a gym and training for half an hour, or going out and doing cross-country, really, really heavy physical activity. So people were feeling like they weren't able to do it. And all they meant was, don't take when you have a bus, get off the bus 2 stops earlier and walk, They weren't thinking anymore, but people didn't understand them. The other group was youth. I'm going to translate what the youth said. The youth, when they were being asked about physical activity, kept saying SB 2013 to these people who work in the health department. And they didn't understand what this meant. And they finally asked. First, they just nod their heads and go, "Okay, SB 2013." It meant Summer Body 2013. So the way to get to the youth was to understand what their hopes and dreams were, and that was to have a nice, sexy body, so the teenagers would feel confidence that they could get, a little action that summer. It's really all about connecting dots. So you have enormous amounts of information, and you need to sort through it and connect the dots to come up with something that's meaningful, relevant, useful, and desirable. And it's also about zooming in and zooming out. Too often, when we put an expert hat on, and I'm convinced that many of you are experts in your field, you're allowed to keep that expertise. That's not the problem, but know when to wear the hat. And the problem is when we keep it, we also have blinders on. So this is the area that we're really good at. And we have to allow ourselves to see that in the context of the whole piece in order to make solutions that are meaningful and relevant. Whoops, wrong way. I'm going to go through this quickly because I'm short of time. The main issue is when in designing services or products or organizational change. I do this, as I said earlier, in the public sector, private sector, all over the world. And most recently, I'm working with ideal organizations, the United Nations, to help them understand why their services that they have for the people really in need aren't working. It has to do with first impressions to lasting impressions. It has to do with understanding the needs before they come to you. So a person has a need to take a bus. What happens prior to that? When the need arises when they need to go somewhere. Like for me, I needed to leave the train and get to my hotel. That's where I needed to know something. And then I go to start searching it. And when I decide to use your service, which was non-existent in Eindhoven, then I wanted to work with me and follow me along the way. And the end and extent is very important because the best way to get to know about your community is to hear other people telling about the good services and not the bad ones. It's always about involvement. It's always about aspirations and motivations. And it's not in the what, but in the why. The example I want to give you here is when I ask people in workshops about making whatever they want. At this time I was working at Microsoft. Everyone makes a teletransportation device. Beam me up, Scotty. Now, if I stopped there and came back to Microsoft and said, everybody wants a teletransportation device, that information would have been useless for the company. But when you ask her, why does she want to have that? This woman is Spanish. She says, because I live in Madrid and my children have grown up and moved to other countries, and all I want is to close my eyes at the touch of the finger, be with them. And that helps my developers and designers and project managers and business folk to work together to come up with meaningful and relevant products and services that bring her the feeling of a teletransportation device. Howard and Martha, I'm going to hop because I know I'm going to be lacking time towards the end. Howard and Martha worked with me for 10 years, from the time they were 75 to 85 on different products. They found more bugs in the Windows XP operating system than any other internet expert or technology expert. And Howard died at the onset of the next operating system. Unfortunately, for our products and services. But when he died, I traveled to his funeral. I was in London, traveled back to the US to be with his wife, Martha. And when I came there, I opened up, I have 5 minutes? Okay, thank you. I opened up my laptop, and there were hundreds of mails from people working at Microsoft. We have, 90,000 employees, saying, please say their condolences to Martha. And the most important one was from, and I didn't know about it until that day, was from the technical support, the senior vice president of technical support, who wanted to tell me that there was a corner of the technical support building that was called Howard's Corner. And it was to remind us of who we're building for and who we're building with. So if you're not a believer in what I'm talking about there, this story I tell now, it still makes me cry, was my understanding of what it meant for the employees, the people who I worked with, what it helped them do and what it helped them understand in their brain. I'm going to skip this again from time, but if you haven't seen this, go online and look for it. The real issue is when we don't work together. The customer wants one thing, the project leader has another picture in his head, the engineer designs it in a different way, the programmer writes it in a completely different way. The sales executive always tells you something that doesn't exist. The project's never documented. The operations, what operations installed? None. How the customer was billed? Pretty high. And how the help desk supported it. And this is really what we are are dilemmas that we have today. The main thing I understood through the processes of working at Microsoft and Boeing, and also in the public sector where I work now, is we have to stop. If there's one thing you remember from this presentation, please remember, stop creating for others and start creating with them. Whether it's internal in your organization or external, outward towards the people you serve. So what? Tell me when I only have 1 minute left. Okay? Is that cool? We have another problem. We live in the age of turbulence. At the touch of a finger, we can go anywhere and the world comes to us, as I did. We're drowning in data, but we're very thirsty for information. And yet we have this empowerment through dialogue. The real issue is that today your reputation is online. Not in what you do and say, but what others say and do about you. The biggest impact we have today is the democratization of knowledge, and we need to move beyond knowledge. The real question today is how to apply knowledge in new ways. But we are stuck in a mindset from the Industrial Revolution. I'm going to skip. Just to give you a clue on what this looks like, we're very linear in our workflows. I'm sure you guys have a fairly linear process, but this is reality. This is what really we're fighting against. We need people to take charge of the whole experience, looking at the organization or the brand, the products and the services, and the people. And who in your company is in charge for that? I only have 1 more minute, so I'm going to go right to the end. I have to skip the Grunful story, which is important, but basically engineers, when you ask them what they do, they say, I build pumps. But what they really build is water pumps, and their whole work is around water, but they forget the water. They forget the water. We have big problems to solve in society today. And our needs, love and humanity. I have some Norwegian there, just forget about that. What are you doing in your organizations and as individuals today to keep love and humanity in focus? We need to be seen, heard, and accepted for who we are. That's Olga. And we search for ways to move in and out of the chaos of our daily lives. What are you doing about these things? We want to create and share with others. I believe we can change our mindset. Howard's Corner told me how. The success of the program is simply failing forward, being allowed to fail forward and learn from your failures, having multidisciplinary teams, co-creation, that's working together. You guys will get the slide deck later, so don't worry if I go too fast. Understanding that the truth always unfolds if you're patient, and embracing diversity. You need to have courage to fail forward, humbleness to encourage your employees to be better than you are, patience to be an active listener, interdependence, the willingness to get assistance from others instead of trying to solve the problems yourself, and curiosity to go beyond the pump and focus on the water, which is the real problem. I'd like to end by saying that like-minded children play best, but they do not learn anything. And thank you.